Today, we're diving into the pretty shocking and honestly super fast collapse of a true luxury icon, Saks Global. For decades, this was the name in high fashion. And now? Well, now it's a huge cautionary tale. So let's get into it and break down exactly how this all went so wrong.
And there it is, the headline that just sent shockwaves through the entire retail world. Saks Global, the company behind a name that's basically synonymous with luxury, has filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. It's a stunning fall from the top. So the real question is, how on earth did we get here?
And just to be clear, we're not talking about some faceless holding company nobody's ever heard of. No, this is the parent company of the iconic Saks Fifth Avenue. This isn't just a little stumble. It's the toppling of a giant that has, for generations, defined what high-end American retail even looks like. Okay, so the story of this collapse, it really all comes down to one single enormous gamble. We're talking about a multi-billion-dollar deal that was supposed to be the company's ticket to the future. But instead, it turned into the anchor that dragged the whole thing down.
And here's that gamble in one absolutely jaw-dropping number: $2.65 billion. That's the price tag. That's what Saks' owner, HBC, shelled out to buy its biggest rival, Neiman Marcus. The idea was to create this unstoppable force in the luxury world.
And get this wasn't some deal they made a decade ago. This all went down in 2024. As one retail analyst, Neil Saunders, pointed out, the only thing that was really surprising here was the incredible speed of the collapse. I mean, we're talking less than 2 years after this massive deal was finalized. Wow. On paper, the strategy actually made a lot of sense. The thinking was, if you merge these two giants, you create a luxury behemoth with unbelievable power. It could go to the big fashion houses and demand better prices and create a shopping experience so amazing that it would pull customers right back into the stores. That was the dream anyway.
But here's the problem. This huge gamble, it wasn't happening in some stable, healthy market. The entire foundation of retail was already shaking, creating what was basically a perfect storm for this deal to turn into an absolute disaster.
I mean, just look at what Saks was up against. You had shoppers who just weren't going to department stores anymore. Then you had the big brands deciding to sell directly to their customers, cutting out the middleman. Throw in a shaky economy, and this growing feeling from people that the luxury stuff they're buying just isn't as high quality as it used to be, and you've got a really, really tough situation.
And this right here shows you the fundamental problem. For a century, department stores were the gatekeepers, the middlemen. But brands figured out that if they just sell directly to you on their own websites, they don't just sell a handbag. They own the whole relationship. They get your data, they get your loyalty. That gives them all the power, and it leaves stores like Saks kind of out in the cold. And make no mistake, Saks isn't some isolated case. This is part of a much bigger, much more troubling trend. Remember Lord and Taylor? They vanished back in 2020. Then in 2024, Macy's announced it was closing hundreds of stores. Saks Global is just the latest, and maybe the biggest, domino to fall in this chain.
So, you take all of that pressure from the outside, you combine it with that mountain of debt from the Neiman Marcus deal, and what happens? You get this devastating chain reaction inside the company. It's a classic downward spiral that, once it started, was pretty much impossible to stop.
The first major public sign that something was seriously wrong came just a few months ago. The CEO, Mark Metrick, suddenly stepped down. And the reason that leaked out? A huge missed debt payment. I mean, when the captain abandons the ship, you know it's in big trouble.
And this is exactly how it all unraveled. It starts with a serious cash shortage because of all that debt. So, step 2, you can't pay your suppliers. Well, when vendors and brands stop getting paid, they stop shipping you new products, which leads to step 3, these ugly empty gaps on the shelves. Customers see that, and what do? They stop coming. And that's step 4, which leads directly to step 5, revenue just completely craters. And the spiral just keeps going faster and faster.
That analyst we mentioned earlier, Neil Saunders from Global Data, he just hit the nail on the head. He called it a classic vicious spiral and said it put the business in a position that was unsustainable. And really, that's the perfect way to describe how a financial problem turned into a full-blown operational catastrophe.
All right, so the company's in a total freefall. What happens next? Well, filing for bankruptcy isn't necessarily the end of the story. It's really the beginning of a very new and very, very difficult chapter.
So what's the game plan? Well, they've managed to secure $1 billion in special financing just to keep the lights on and pay employees. On top of that, there's another $500 million promised for when they eventually emerge from bankruptcy. The official goal, they say, is to use this crisis as a chance to totally rebuild for a new world of retail. We'll see.
But when a giant like Saks Global falls, it's about so much more than just one company that made one bad deal. It forces the entire industry to ask a really tough question. Is the whole idea of the grand, fancy, luxury department store, is it just obsolete? That's the question everyone in the world of retail is scrambling to answer right now.